So, you want to make an Omori sprite. Sprites are extremely easy to create. All you really need is a copy of Omori and an art program that supports transparent pictures. For convenience sake, I'm using IBIS for this tutorial since it's free and whatever. Anyways, this tutorial will simply be for portrait sprites, but someday I may make a video on overworld sprites once I'm more familiar with how to create them. I'm going to assume at least half of you who are watching this are interested in modding your sprites into the game. And if you're not, you can still follow the art process without listening to my incoherent mumbling. So before we get into the actual sprite making, it's important to note that all OMORI sprites are 106 times 106 pixels big. If you're going to make portraits that appear in the overworld, you're going to make rows of 4. However, if you're doing battle portraits, you're going to do rows of 3. I'm going to be focusing more on overworld sprites and then briefly touch on the battle portraits, as really the two work very similarly. I would recommend making yourself a checkerboard template that touches on how big each of your squares will be, so it helps you remember when your sprites will cut off. Alright, I'm going to open IBIS with my handmade template and we can start the actual art process. OMOCAT's process involves digitally sketching out the sprite, doing the line art on traditional paper, and then coloring in the final project on a digital canvas again, but of course it's pretty tedious and I have the attention span of your average TikTok user. Not to mention you can get a very similar result just by doing everything online. I've already completed 2 sprites already, as you can see next to the third square, and I'd say they look pretty convincing by themselves. Obviously, you're going to start by sketching your character out. Now, I'm not very good at drawing in the Omori art style, so there's a little cheat you can use to make it more authentic looking. You can grab a pre-existing character portrait and trace out their face, then do the rest yourself. I use Sunny sprites for Samuel's portrait so I can get his head shape right. Though, of course, if you're drawing a more complicated design or you're a greater artist than I am, you can go ahead and doodle whatever you like for the sketch, as long as the character is front-facing. Now, I know the way I'm drawing Samuel's hair isn't very in line with how the character's looks, but I reject doing it OMOCAT's way because I don't want to and I'm simply better than her. Now for the line art, the easiest part of this tutorial. Make a new layer, make your sketch layer around 20% transparent, and then use the new layer to sketch a black, or blue if you're making a headspace character, thin line over your previous work. The biggest pain of this part would be accidentally drawing on the sketch layer, so take extra precaution not to do that. Since we have our checkerboard template, I'd personally recommend using the wand tool to select the area before drawing. It's also useful for that reason, as you don't have to manually erase the bottom of your sprite yourself. You can fix whatever mistakes you have as you go, and I personally enjoy duplicating the line art layer so I can trace over it later. So when you're finished with your line art, I usually fill in the entire sprite in gray before actually coloring so that I can later just clip my color layers on top of the gray area. You're going to begin with base color, obviously. I'm manually filling in this stuff because I dislike using bucket tool for occasions like this. You can pull colors from the OMORI sprites or create your own. Now for the shadows. When it comes to the OMORI sprites, OMOCAT tends to use a mix between cell shading and airbrush, from what I can tell. So I begin with using a slightly dark color for the airbrush segments, which will be under the hair, neck, and around the chin. I'm using Sunny sprites for reference here. It'll look like he's got first-degree burns at first, but you just have to trust the process. I'll usually lessen the opacity so it blends in much more. After using the airbrush, I take a darker color and trace along the more shadowy areas of the airbrush, so just a little bit below the hair and a bit of stuff on the neck. If your character's hair is black or you're coloring in a headspace character that's not basil, you can just scribble the rest of the color in. If your character's hair is not black, you can see that there are pencil lines that slowly grow more intense as they trail down the character's hair. I personally just use IBIS default pencil brush that's been moderated slightly, and I lower my layer's opacity and scribble from the bangs downward. I draw more pencil lines the further I go, so it has that OMORI look to it. You can add any further polish to it, but there you have it, an OMORI sprite. You can repeat this process for however many other emotions you want to give your character, and I'll show you how to implement them in game later. Now for battle portraits. It's pretty much the same process, if not easier, to keep track of. I'm going to be using my old 3rd tier sprites I made earlier for OMORI's friends. You'll notice that the battle sprites are in a very particular order, and though they're in rows of 3 instead of the 4 we had creating Samuel's sprites. For the headspace people, you can do the same process as before, but they're only 2 colors, so it'll be faster. And be sure to saturate their sprites too, just like the original ones. Do that 2 more times and you have at least 1 animation for your character in OMORI battles.